Life was supposed to be straightforward for a guy like me, VJ, a simple job, a loving wife, and a couple of great kids. That's what I thought I had, up until last week. That's when everything turned upside down, thanks to our living room's smart TV and a text that flashed across the screen. Let me take you back to the start. My name's Jake, and I've been married to Linda for about 15 years. I work in logistics, nothing fancy, just enough to keep us comfortable. Linda used to have a job at a nursery when she was younger, but after we got married, she decided to stay home. We have 2 kids, Sarah and Lizzie, 13 and 11. Life was good, or so I thought. So, last Tuesday, it was our buddy Mike's birthday. He's been living abroad for a few years now, and we decided to give him a midnight video call to celebrate. After singing him happy birthday, Linda, the girls, and I ended up chatting with Mike and his wife about life and work. Mike's wife suggested we could Chromecast our WhatsApp video call to the TV so we could all sit back and relax more comfortably. Linda quickly set it up since she was always tech-savvy, and soon we were laughing and reminiscing like old times. As the night went on, Linda started feeling unwell. DJ said she was dizzy VJ and ended up dozing off on the sofa. The rest of us kept chatting until the call dropped due to a bad connection. As I was about to redial, Linda's phone screen, still connected to the TV, lit up with a new message from someone saved as Heartthrob with a heart emoji next to the name. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on it, only to find out it was from a guy named Chris. I knew Chris. He was Linda's old-school friend, always around, always too close for comfort. The message read, "Miss you tons, babe." That line alone felt like a punch to the gut. I hesitated, but ended up opening their chat. The more I read, the angrier I got. There were messages from him saying he couldn't sleep without her goodnight kiss. And worse, much worse. They had been exchanging messages like this for months. Pictures. 2 VJ, more of them than I ever wanted to see. I was crushed. Betrayed. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there as the evidence of Linda's betrayal scrolled past on our 50-inch screen. I didn't know how to confront her. It was around 2 a.m., and I was a mix of anger and Scotch VDJ, too many emotions, and too much alcohol to think straight. Eventually, Linda woke up. Realizing what was on the TV, she panicked, grabbed the remote, and turned it off. She rushed to disconnect her phone, but the damage was done. I saw it all. Her face when she realized I knew was something I'll never forget. She tried to explain, to tell me it wasn't what it looked like. But how could it be anything else? "I can explain," she pleaded, but I was too numb to listen. "You know what? Don't bother," I said. I couldn't even look at her. I just walked away to our bedroom and slammed the door behind me. She knocked, softly at first, then desperately. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I lay there in the dark, the weight of what I'd learned crushing me. The next morning, the air was heavy with the night's revelations. Linda tried to act normal, as if nothing happened, but the tension was too thick. She attempted to hug me, and I just backed away. "Jake, you're overreacting. He's just a friend," she insisted, but her words felt hollow. "A friend?" "Linda, don't insult me," I snapped. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Who sends nudes to just a friend? Explain that." That's when I decided I needed to know everything. How long it had been going on, why she did it. But as she started to talk, I couldn't bear to hear her voice. It was all too much. I needed space to think, to figure out my next steps. But one thing was clear. My simple life was a lie, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the days dragged on after that terrible night, Linda's true colors came shining through. She wasn't just remorseful, she was angry, like it was somehow my fault I had caught her. Each morning as we navigated around each other in our small kitchen, her voice would drip with sarcasm. "Really, Jake, you're still on about this?" It was nothing. "You're blowing it all out of proportion," she'd say, rolling her eyes as she sipped her coffee. I'd just stare at her, dumbfounded. How could she act like her betrayal was a minor inconvenience? But Linda was good at playing games. She'd switch from icy to sweet in a heartbeat, especially when she wanted something. And right now, she wanted my forgiveness, VDJ, without giving anything in return. "You know, if you weren't always so busy with work, maybe I wouldn't have needed someone to talk to," she said one evening, her tone sharp and accusing. That hit hard. I'd been working overtime for years to provide for us, to ensure our daughters had everything they needed. Her words felt like a slap in the face, blaming me for her decisions, her mistakes. It was classic Linda of never her fault. Always someone else's. I can't believe you're trying to pin this on me, I replied, my voice rising despite my attempts to keep calm. You think working to support my family is a crime? You think that justifies what you did? She just shrugged, unbothered by my anger. Well, you weren't around, were you? Maybe if you were, things would have been different. I didn't even know how to respond to that. How do you argue with someone who refuses to see the truth, who twists it to fit their own narrative? The next few days were a blur of arguments and cold silences. I slept in the guest room, unable to be near her, to pretend our marriage wasn't crumbling. Our daughters noticed the tension, of course. Sarah asked me one morning why Mommy and Daddy were so mad at each other. I didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain something like this to a child? It's just grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Well, figure it out, I managed to say, but the look in her eyes told me she didn't buy it. Linda didn't make things any easier. She paraded around the house like she was the victim, sighing dramatically and sending texts all day long. I wondered if she was still in touch with Chris, but I didn't have the heart to check her phone again. I was too tired, too worn down by the constant fighting and her relentless self-pity. It was just a bit of fun, Jake. You're making it into something it wasn't, she snapped one day when I asked her to at least show some remorse. Fun? I echoed, incredulous. You call destroying our family fun? She just looked at me, her expression cold and distant. You wouldn't understand, she muttered before walking away. That's when I realized that maybe this was really the end. There was no remorse in her eyes, no guilt, just irritation that her life was being disrupted. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. This wasn't the woman I married, or maybe it was, and I just never saw it. But one thing was clear. I had to protect my daughters and myself from any more of her selfishness. As I lay awake that night, listening to the silence of the house, I knew what I had to do. It would be hard, heartbreaking even, but it was necessary. I couldn't let her deceit define our lives. The next morning I would call a lawyer. I needed to find out what my options were, not just for divorce, but for ensuring my girls were safe and cared for. Linda might not care about tearing us apart, but it'd be damned if I didn't fight for my daughter's future. The morning sun hadn't even begun to peek over the horizon when I decided it was time to take action. I got up early, determined to get some advice before Linda woke up, and the daily circus of accusations and cold shoulders began again. I found a local attorney online VJ someone who specialized in family law VJ, and made an appointment for later that morning. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was firm. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Sarah and Lizzie, too. They deserved better than the chaos at home. I sat in the attorney's waiting room, tapping my foot nervously. It felt surreal, being here. I kept thinking about how Linda and I had once been a team, dreaming about the future together. Now here I was, discussing how to end everything we had built. When the lawyer, Mr. Davis, called me into his office, I explained the situation as best I could. He listened, nodding sympathetically, and then laid out my options. It wasn't going to be easy or quick, but he assured me that we'd do everything possible to protect my interests and, more importantly, those of my daughters. You have grounds for divorce based on adultery, which is quite straightforward in terms of evidence, Mr. Davis explained, but your main concern VJ custody of your daughters, J, is also manageable. We'll aim for full custody, given the circumstances. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that I was taking steps to resolve this nightmare, and dread about how Linda would react when she found out. I knew it wouldn't be pretty. Linda had a way of turning things around VJ, making herself look like the wronged party. I wasn't looking forward to the showdown that was coming. Sure enough, when I got back home, Linda was already up, her mood as stormy as the dark clouds gathering outside. "Where were you this morning?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Sneaking around, are you?" "I went to see a lawyer," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "We need to talk about our future. Jay, or rather, the lack of one together." Her face went white, then flushed with anger. "You want a divorce?" she hissed, stepping closer. "Is that it, Jake? You're going to throw away 15 years because of one little mistake?" "One little mistake," I repeated, incredulous. "Linda, you've been lying to me, to us, for who knows how long. This isn't just a mistake, it's a betrayal." She scoffed, crossing her arms. Well, maybe if you had paid more attention to me, shown me some affection, I wouldn't have needed to find it elsewhere. I couldn't believe she was still trying to blame me for her affair. It was like talking to a brick wall vd, no sense of responsibility, just deflection and blame. That's not how it works, Linda. You made a choice, I replied, my voice firm. Now I'm making mine. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to ask for full custody of Sarah and Lizzie. The look on her face was a mix of shock and fury. You can't do that. You can't take my girls away from me. They need stability, Linda. Something you're not capable of providing right now. I was trying to stay calm, but it was hard. This was the woman I had loved, the mother of my children, and yet I felt like I was dealing with a stranger. As the argument escalated, I realized this was going nowhere. Well, let the courts decide, I said finally, turning to leave the room. Linda's voice followed me, a stream of accusations and insults, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. There was too much at stake. That night, as I lay in the guest room listening to the rain pattering against the window, I felt alone but strangely free. The path ahead would be tough, no doubt about it. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life again, stepping out of the shadow of betrayal and into the light of new beginnings, for me and for my girls. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, tense dinners, and strained silence. Every interaction with Linda was laced with hostility, her bitterness seeping into every word and action. She was turning the divorce into a battleground, fighting dirty every chance she got. I hope you're happy, Jake, Linda sneered one evening as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the girls already excused to their rooms to avoid the tension. You're tearing this family apart over your petty insecurities. It's not about insecurities, Linda, I replied, keeping my voice as level as possible. It's about trust, something you broke the moment you decided to step outside our marriage. She laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that made my skin crawl. Trust? Please. You never trusted me. You were always so wrapped up in your work. How could you even notice what I needed? The conversation was going nowhere as usual. Linda had made up her mind that she was the victim here, and nothing I could say would change her perspective. Her ability to twist the truth was astounding. She had an answer for everything, a way to make every one of her actions somehow my fault. It was exhausting trying to keep up with her manipulations. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, Linda became more aggressive. She tried to turn the girls against me, telling them that I was the reason our family was breaking up, that I had forced her into the arms of another man because I wasn't there for her. It pained me to see Sarah and Lizzie caught in the middle of our mess. I did my best to shield them, to reassure them that both their mom and I love them, no matter what. You know I love you both more than anything, right? I would say as I tucked them into bed at night. They would nod, their eyes big and uncertain. And no matter what happens, that's never going to change. But Linda's venom was potent. One day I overheard her on the phone with a friend, laughing about how she had the upper hand now, how she was going to make sure she got everything she wanted from the divorce. He thinks he can just throw me away like yesterday's trash, she said, her voice dripping with scorn. I'll show him. I'll take him for everything he's worth. Hearing her say those words so filled with spite was a low point for me. It hurt to know that the person I had spent nearly 2 decades with could be so vindictive, so cold. It hurt even more to think about how her actions were affecting our daughters. As the court date approached, the atmosphere at home became even more unbearable. Linda would fling accusations at me daily, her words like daggers aimed to wound. She refused to settle, to compromise, even when Mr. Davis suggested it might be best for everyone involved, especially the girls. No, she snapped during one mediation session. I want what I'm owed. I won't settle for less. Her stubbornness was infuriating, but I wasn't about to back down either. I couldn't let her walk all over me, not after everything she had done. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and determination as I walked into the courthouse. Linda was already there, dressed sharply, her face set in a mask of defiance. We didn't speak as we took our seats on opposite sides of the courtroom. As the proceedings began, Linda's lawyer painted her as a devoted wife and mother who had been driven into the arms of another man by my neglect. I clenched my fists under the table, forcing myself to remain calm. When it was my turn, Mr. Davis laid out the facts, the evidence of the affair, Linda's lack of remorse, her attempts to manipulate the situation to her advantage. The judge listened intently, asking pointed questions, gauging the truth in the tangled web of emotions and accusations. When he finally spoke, his voice was firm. "It is clear that this marriage has been irretrievably broken," he said, looking from me to Linda. "And while the blame is shared, the actions taken by Mrs. Linda in the aftermath of her affair have only served to further damage the relationship." He granted the divorce, giving me primary custody of Sarah and Lizzie, with Linda receiving visitation rights. As for the financial settlements, he was fair, but leaned in my favor, likely due to Linda's vindictive actions throughout the proceedings. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over, finally. I could begin to rebuild, to focus on healing the wounds that the past few months had inflicted on my family. Linda, however, looked like she had been slapped. She stormed out of the courtroom without a word, her plans to ruin me financially thwarted. I watched her go, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. The woman I had married, the woman I had loved, was a stranger to me now. But as I left the courthouse, my heart was lighter. I had my girls, and I had my integrity. We would be okay, I told myself. We would get through this, and we would find happiness again, away from the shadow of Linda's betrayal. The weeks following the divorce were a bittersweet mix of relief and rebuilding. Linda had moved out shortly after the verdict, her pride bruised and her schemes foiled. She rented a small apartment not too far away, claiming she wanted to stay close for the girls. I appreciated that at least, because whatever our issues, Sarah and Lizzie loved their mother. It was important they maintained a good relationship with her. Our home felt strangely empty without Linda's presence. There were no more arguments, no tension in the air VDA. It was peaceful, yes, but also a stark reminder of everything that had transpired. I found myself wandering through the rooms, memories flooding back at every turn. The silence was loud, filled with echoes of laughter, fights, and whispered promises now broken. I had to remind myself repeatedly that this was better, healthier for all of us in the long run. Sarah and Lizzie adjusted as well as could be expected. They missed their mom, of course, but they also enjoyed the newfound tranquility at home. We spent a lot of time together playing games, watching movies, talking about everything and nothing. These moments were healing for us, a way to reinforce that some bonds, the most important ones, remained unbroken. Linda's interactions with the girls were civil when I was around, but I could always catch a glimpse of resentment in her eyes. It was clear she hadn't forgiven me for winning in court, as she put it. During exchanges, she was polite but distant, her words carefully measured. Sarah and Lizzie seemed to sense her bitterness, and it pained me to see them caught in this emotional crossfire. "She still talks about you, you know," Sarah told me one evening as I tucked her into bed. "Mom, she says things." "What kind of things?" I asked gently, not sure if I wanted to hear the answer. "Just that you made things hard for her, that you didn't see how hard she tried." Sarah's voice was small, confused. It broke my heart. "I see," I murmured, stroking her hair. "Your mom and I, we have different views about what happened, sweetheart. But no matter what, we both love you and Lizzie more than anything. You know that, right?" She nodded, snuggling into her pillow. "I know, Daddy. I love you too." I kissed her forehead and left the room, my thoughts heavy. How could I mend these invisible wounds we were all carrying? In the months that followed, I threw myself into my work and into being the best dad I could be. The girls were my priority, and I did everything to ensure they felt secure and loved. We started seeing a family therapist, which helped us navigate our new reality. It was a safe space for the girls to express their feelings, and for me to learn how to better support them through this transition. Linda and I eventually reached a sort of truce. For the sake of Sarah and Lizzie, we kept our communications polite and focused on their needs. It wasn't easy. Every conversation with Linda was a reminder of what had been and what could never be again. But I found strength in my daughter's smiles, in their laughter, in the love we shared. As time passed, the sharp edges of betrayal and anger began to soften. I started to forgive, not for Linda's sake, but for my own, and for Sarah and Lizzie. Holding on to the bitterness was too heavy a burden, one that I no longer wished to bear. I focused instead on building a future, on rewriting our story into one of resilience and hope. One sunny Saturday, almost a year after the divorce, I took the girls to the park. We played frisbee, had a picnic, and lay on the grass looking up at the sky. Watching them run around, their laughter ringing clear and true, I felt a profound sense of peace. "Dad," Lizzie said, coming over to lie next to me, "I'm glad we're okay, you know? Yeah?" I turned to look at her, her face serious for such a young age. "Yeah, I like it better this way. It's quieter, but it's better." She smiled, a little wistfully, and I hugged her tight. "Me too, kiddo," I whispered. "Me too." In that moment, I knew we were going to be okay. More than okay, actually. We had faced unimaginable changes, but here we were, stronger and closer than ever. Life had thrown us a curveball, but we had caught it and thrown it right back. From that day on, I embraced our new life with a renewed vigor. We were not defined by Linda's actions or by the dissolution of our marriage. We were defined by how we rose from those ashes, by the love that remained. Our story wasn't about a tragic ending. It was about a new beginning, a testament to the enduring power of family and love. And as I watched Sarah and Lizzie play, their faces alight with joy, I realized that this, right here, was all I ever needed. The path hadn't been easy, but it had led us here, to this moment, to this feeling of completeness. Sometimes, the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations, and ours was truly beautiful.